Go. Hello,
Good
Professor
afternoon,
Spooner.
friend.
How you doing?
Okay, this is it's remarkable that we should be doing this with minutes after this big announcement on the what's the name of the lawn on in the White House where these things get announced.
I think they're in the Rose Garden.
The Rose Garden,
Right.
That's right, yes, Rose Garden. And it's just the right time of the year for roses. I don't know what the Rose Garden really looks like, but anyway, I find it very interesting because it seems to me that that so many of the things that our current president claimed he would do or promised he would do when he was campaigning, he's not doing. And I think he found himself in a situation where he understood less about this than the other things that he decided not to do. So he's going to go ahead with this one anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But in fact, this one may not be the most important. I think it's very important that he's decided not to move the U.S. embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And I hadn't known before, reading about it today, that the Congress had instructed the president to move it from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, and Clinton, Bush, and Obama had got around it.
Right. They all passed.
I hadn't realized that.
Right.
And about one or two other things as well. But I understand that 195 nations signed this deal, and 147 have already done the necessary things in their own country to get it approved. And the only countries that are not part of it are Syria and Nicaragua.
Well, and now you can add the United States to that list. Although he's going to have difficulty getting out because it's going to take a minimum of 3 years to get out. So
3 or 4, I think. Yes.
Yeah.
But obviously, if he's getting out, then he won't actually be doing anything in those 4 years. But the whole issue of climate change is very complicated, and people tend to be more ideologically decided about it than scientifically, because the science is very complicated.
Mm-hmm.
And the data that we have for global warming is not as complete as it's often made out to be, which doesn't mean to say we shouldn't be looking out for it. But whether we really want to get all the miners back down into the mines, wringing out coal and getting the coal burned or not, I don't know. I think probably not. Anyway, my reaction to this is that Trump is taking America out of the process of globalization.
I think you're exactly right, and I think you, at the onset of these discussions years ago, you began to speak about how the era of the United States was fading and the ascendancy of China was in the future. And I think no clearer example of that exists than what's happening today. The United States is getting out of the way, and the Chinese are coming in a big way and are going to begin to play the paramount role on the global stage.
And China has either the biggest investment or one of the biggest national investments in alternative energy. And of course, some people might react to that idea by saying, well, didn't Great Britain just get out? Didn't the United Kingdom just get out? Well, I think the vote for Brexit was inspired very differently from the vote to get out of the climate agreement. The getting out of the climate agreement is getting out of a global movement. Getting out of the European Union is getting out of a horrendous bureaucracy, which is by no means global. And that's not to say that I agree with Brexit, but I think the motivations are very different. But it is amusing in a way that the world was to some extent under British hegemony from the 19th century through till the Second World War, and been under American hegemony since then, and now both of them, superficially at any rate, whether it's actually will work out that way, seem to be avoiding globalization. But I think actually the point is that America has, by believing in its own hegemony, has become more and more isolated, and is just not so intimately connected with what any other part of the world is doing now as it had been in the past.
Well, I think what's going to happen is that commercially, which is really where most of this globalization begins anyway, and then secondly, culturally, I think those two thrusts are going to continue insofar as interconnectivity and globalization goes between the United States and the rest of the world. But what's going to be increasingly evident is that the government of the United States is going to be striking out on its own, not only on its own vis-a-vis the rest of the globe, but also on its own vis-a-vis the majority of its population. It's going to be a very strange situation. I mean, people are referring to it as the wilderness that Trump is leading us into, and they're not kidding.
Yeah, but it's going to be interesting over the next few weeks to see how what the reaction to this is in Europe in particular, but also in the other large economies, because after all, trade is what drives globalization, and trade is organized from cities, and so I mean this all and the world is gradually becoming more and more urbanized. So it's very much an international situation that we need to wait and see how other people will react. But after the, what was it, the TPP? The
Trans-Pacific Partnership, yes.
That he took America out of to begin with. And now these are two big things which America had been part of and could have been leading to maintain its global position, and it's opted out, and in fact what it was going to be a part of will, I'm sure, continue, but America will be gradually more and more isolated.
Well, I have to tell you, in the beginning of these discussions, when you began to talk about the inevitability of China and the inevitability of the American decline, I didn't really believe it, but I've come now to believe it over these past months. And things happen for reasons. If you had spotted what you spotted a year ago or 2 years ago, it's just not the accidental election of this person as president of the United States that caused these things. Something's happening, all right? Whether it's a weariness of the soul from a national or cultural level, or whether there's just simply an aggressiveness and ambition from another country. But
well, I think, don't let me interrupt you if you had something else to say about that. I think that the bigger situation now is that the democratic process, which we have developed only really over the last, I mean, democracy has worked differently since the middle of the last century from the way it worked before then. And after all, the idea isn't that old in the Western world. Mm-hmm. You could say that the American Constitution is based on it, but that only makes it 300 years old, or less than that. But I think that it's not working the way we wanted it to work anymore. It's no longer, up until recently, up until towards the end of the 20th century, it was possible for even the largest democratic countries to choose a leader from one or other of two parties. I think that's not going to work anymore. The parties can't agree on a single platform anymore, mm-hmm. And there's too much, and the population is participating much more fully in the development of public opinion, that an either-or choice is not good enough.
You're exactly correct. I mean, this binary kind of proposition that's presented to the voters just is unworkable. And we've often talked about which is the solution. Is the solution more of an exclusive kind of arrangement where governance is controlled by a small cadre of people, or is some sort of large, diffuse kind of fragmented leadership the only way that the democracies are going to be able to go? And if it's the latter, I think that's unworkable. So then we're talking about the former, which is almost advocating dare I say it, some sort of ruling kind of cadre to run these democracies, and they're no longer democracies at that point.
Well, it's a very difficult problem because in the past it's always been solved ideologically. People would formulate ideologies and they'd work.
But there are too many ideologies now.
They preach them.
Mm-hmm.
And people would decide which they were going to work with and which they were going to try to work against. But the most recent development of a democratic society probably is Iran.
Yes, you're right. You're right.
Nobody accepts it as a democratic society. And it doesn't work on a party system.
Mm-hmm.
It works on a committee system.
Mm-hmm.
So starting from the ground up, there are committees in groups of streets in big cities, in villages, and each committee appoints a member of that committee to be a participant in the next committee up, and that committee appoints a committee member to be a participant in the next committee up. I'm not saying that that's the way the world is going to work, but it's what's interesting is that it's a new way of doing it, and it involves probably much more participation throughout the whole population than the two-party system ever did.
That's a very interesting idea. That's a very interesting idea, because the current system we have is unworkable. And what the Iranians are doing does seem to work.
But I think that it's not so. I wouldn't try to push the Iranian system as the solution to the problem, but as an example of the possibility of doing things differently.
Correct. Correct.
That should give people the idea that they can think of other opportunities and other possibilities. Because I think that the biggest problem in globalization is going to be how to organize a larger number of people. Because all the history of organization that we have has been of smaller numbers of people. And all the ideas for institutionalization that we have developed so far don't work with the larger numbers. So I think that's going to be the biggest problem, and it's going to take some time to work it out, and we have to hope that it can be worked out smoothly.
Well, then, as we've often discussed, we need something to break through the complacency of the institutions in order to galvanize people into recognizing that something does have to change. And
we need a different sort of leader from Trump to do it.
Well, or it could be a continuation of Trump that finally causes everybody to throw their hands up and say, enough, we can't sustain this again.
Well, it's amazing what the New Yorker is publishing about
isn't
Trump.
it? Yes, it's something. Yeah, I look forward to reading it every day. So, yes. All right, well, I'll report as to how our British friends think when I'm over there next week.
Okay.
All right, Brian. Thanks very much. Bye. Bye.